In this example, we're asked to write down the values of the angles shown. So first we will start with drawing the graph of sine and knowing how would that plot across the 90 degrees. So first we're looking at sine 90. So we can see sine of 90 degrees, it crosses, it's 1 as we plot the sine graph, and this will be here. So that tells us that sine of 90 is 1. Now we look at sine of 180. So we pay attention to the sine graph, and that tells us that sine of 180 is 0. 180 degrees is equivalent to 0. We also can look at sine of 270 degrees, and looking at the sine graph, that tells us that sine of 270, it's in the negative coordinate, so that will be -1. And this will be our answer for sine of 270 being -1. Now we look at the graph of cosine, and we can see it starts from 1 and crosses across each 90 degrees. So we look at part D. We have cosine of 180 degrees. So 180 degrees tells us that it crosses at this location here. So that tells us the cosine of 180 is -1. So that will be part D. Now we look at the cosine of -90 degrees. So in this scenario, we are working in the opposite direction. So that tells us if we work in the opposite direction, that's -90. So in this scenario, we have 0. So that's E. And that tells us that cosine of -90 is 0. Now we look at part F. So cosine of 450 degrees. So cosine of 450 degrees is almost another cycle in this scenario, and that will give us 0 as it crosses at the x-axis on the positive side. And these will be our answers for the angles shown. In this example, we are asked to find the values for the angles shown, which they represent tan. So the graph of tan, it will be represented as shown, and the lines in between, they represent asymptotes, which is lines that do not cross as the angles get closer. So we will start by looking at tan of 45. So we can see that tan of 45, it will cross somewhere at this location. So let's look at that first, tan of 45 degrees. So it will cross here, and so that tells us that it is 1, as it's halfway across. So that's 45, and this is 1. And this will be our answer. For part B, we have tan of 135 degrees. So 135 degrees, it will be somewhere here, halfway through, or even a little bit closer here, somewhere here. So that tells us that it will be approximately here. So it will be -1. Okay, that's it here, and this is where it crosses. So that's 135 degrees. So it will tell us that it is -1. Now we look at part C. So that's tan of 225 degrees. So 225 degrees, it will be somewhere here. And that will tell us that it will be again 1. So that's part B, and this is part C, and that's 225 degrees. So our answer will be 1. Now we look at part D, so that's tan of minus 45 degrees. So that means we will work on the negative x-axis. So in this scenario, it will be somewhere here in the middle. So in this scenario, we'll be working in the negative axis. So that will tell us, so that will be somewhere here, and which will be -1. So that's part D, and that's minus 45. So that will tell us that it's -1, which is also equivalent to the tan of 315 degrees, which will also give us -1. Now let's look at part E, which is tan of 180, which is positive. So we can see that 180 crosses here, so that's E, and that will be 0 in this scenario. And we can look at also part D, where we have tan of 90 degrees. So tan of 90 degrees, you can see it's here, and because it doesn't cross the asymptote, so that tells us that it's an undefined angle in this scenario, because it doesn't touch, it's on the asymptote. So that tells us that it's not applicable in this scenario, because it's extracted from 1 over 0. So it is not applicable. And these will be our answers for these angles. In this example, we're asked to find the sines of sine theta, cosine theta, and tan theta in the second coordinate. So first we can draw our coordinates, which is y and x axes, and we can take an angle in the second coordinate. It will be in this format, so the angle will be theta, and we can also draw our circle, so we in this form. And we can eliminate this part by extracting it up to here, and also having the x-axis connected here, and this is the y. So that tells us the point of P will be represented in terms of x and y coordinates in this format. So x will be negative, x coordinate is negative, and the y is in this scenario is positive, in this coordinate. So that tells us sine of theta, it will be positive, and the cosine of theta will be negative, and the tan will be tan theta will be sine over cosine theta. So that will tell us that it is positive over negative, so that will give us a negative tan in the second coordinate. So that tells us that only sine theta is positive in the second quadrant. And this will be our answer for this question. In this example, we are asked to find the angles and the ratios of the acute angles for the angles shown. So first we look at part sine minus 100 degrees. So what will be useful for us to consider is remembering how the sines and cosine rules will work in each coordinate, and also that the sines in the first coordinate they're all positive, and sine is positive in the second, tan is positive in the third, and cosine positive in the fourth. So now the way this would look, we will draw our minus 100 starting from the x-axis in the negative direction, so that's going clockwise, and we can see the line of OP here, and we can see for it to be connected to the x-axis. So we'll say in this scenario the acute angle made with the x-axis is 80 degrees, as shown here, where we connect the 80 degrees to the x-axis, and that tells us that in the third quadrant only tan is positive. So that tells us, so sine is negative, and that tells us sine of minus 100 is equivalent to minus the sine of 80 degrees. And this will be our answer for this question. Now for part B, we have cosine of 330 degrees. So we can plot that again, starting from the, in this scenario, because it's positive, we start in the anti-clockwise direction, and we can see that it will be end up in the fourth quadrant. So the way we can explain this, by we say the acute angle made with x-axis is 30 degrees, and in the fourth quadrant we would have cosine is positive, so that tells us cosine of 30 degrees, it will be equivalent to positive cosine of 30 degrees, and this will be our answer for part B. Now we look at part C, where we have tan of 500 degrees. So for us to plot this, again we will work in the anti-clockwise direction. So this is how it would look. So we would have a first cycle and then another continuation of this cycle, and we can see that will create an angle of 40 degrees with the x-axis. So that will tell us the acute angle made with the x-axis is 40 degrees, and in the second quadrant we can see this only sine is positive, then tan of 500 degrees will give us minus tan of 40 degrees, and this will be our answer for this question.